Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise. Here we watch Star Trek the original series episodes one by one and discuss the story structure, character arcs, and whatever is in between them. I am Bala Ramadurai, and with me I have my host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode.
Private Little War. Very confusing. See if the title has any indication to the episode itself. Over to you, Parvati, for the summary.
When this episode opens, what you have is McCoy, Kirk, and Spock. They're on this planet called Neural, and it's pretty green and it's pretty lush. These three are there to do some scientific experiments on the plants of this planet because the plants apparently have medicinal value. But as they're conducting their investigations, they find that the inhabitants of this planet, for some reason, suddenly have firearms. And as far as they know, this is a planet that is still in its primitive stages. So the civilization here hasn't become a civilization, and they are supposed to be in tribal societies. And something has obviously happened to them that they have suddenly got firearms, which is way too advanced for them at this point. And it is here that Kirk sees that one group of tribesmen with firearms is trying to attack another group of tribesmen, and he knows the leader of the other group of tribesmen and he wants to save him because Kirk apparently has been to this planet some 13 years back as a younger officer, and he has befriended this particular tribesman and he saves him from an ambush. But while all of this is happening, Spock is attacked by a ape-like creature called a mugato, and apparently that thing's bites and slashes are poisonous. While they managed to defeat this mugato, he saved his friend, but then that action actually brought them in sight of the other tribesmen, and now they get attacked. Spock is shot, and they have to make an emergency teleportation back to the ship so that he can be healed. And while this is going on, Kirk is actually pretty confused because, like I said before, this is not a planet that has had much development. They are also protected by the Prime Directive, which means outside interference cannot happen. So, someone or something has broken that and allowed them to develop firearms, or they were given firearms as form of some sort of bribe. We don't know at this point. They get back to the ship. Spock is in very bad condition. And we are also introduced to a new character, Dr. Nenga, who has to treat Spock. Kirk wants to go back to the planet and try and find out what is happening there and why they have firearms. So he, along with McCoy, transport themselves back to Neural. When they do that, this Mugato comes back. The mate of the Mugato, I think, or another Mugato, I'm not very sure, comes back, attacks Kirk, and poisons him. And now he's in a very serious state. McCoy manages to contact Kirk's friend and have him taken to the village on Neural. This friend's wife has some healing capacity, so she will be able to extract the poison from Kirk, is what we understand. Kirk's friend is now chieftain. His wife is a very ambitious woman. She comes back to where Kirk is being stationed. She heals Kirk, and now she has designs on Kirk. And then eventually you learn that she also wants her husband to be one of the most powerful individuals on that planet. This particular tribe does not have firearms. Her husband is something of a pacifist. He does not want weapons and violence. But the other tribe does have weapons and violence, and she wants him to be like that so that the tribes are equal and he gets more power. Kirk, after he has recovered from the poison, somehow takes her point of view because it dawns on him that the other tribe has firearms because of the Klingons. It all gets pretty complicated. as the story progresses, Kirk manages to infiltrate the other tribe along with Spock and his friend Tyree. They find that the other tribe is being given firearms by the Klingons, just as he has suspected. And then now Kirk is swayed by his friend's wife to arm the peaceful tribe also with firearms, and he begins to do so, thereby breaking the Prime Directive. It also comes to be that this particular woman, the wife of Kirk's friend, is also something of a traitor. She wants power. She manages to steal Kirk's phaser because that is the most powerful weapon she has ever seen. First of all, she tries to seduce Kirk. When that doesn't work very well, or something goes awry, she steals Kirk's phaser. She goes to the other tribe. She's ambushed by the other tribe, and then she's killed by the other tribe. Her killing was actually the catalyst that brought about total change on that planet, because Kirk's friend Tyree, now he decides that he will opt for violence as a form of vengeance, and the episode ends there. Back to you, Bala.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll try my best to look at it act to act. The 4-act
Yeah.
structure starts off with the teaser. The teaser itself is a longish teaser
Bala,
where
your voice is
you
gone.
initially well, it starts off with a teaser. Teaser gives you a good idea of how long or how complicated the plot really is, because you see McCoy, Spock, and Kirk on a mission to get herbs or medicinal stuff. They're on a routine survey where Kirk has already been there before 13 years ago. That's what he talks about. And
Yeah.
Kirk just declares that this place is the most peaceful planet that he had seen, only to see flintlocks with villagers throwing an ambush at the hill people and all that. So there's some conflict that they can see. So that's where the teaser starts. At the end of all of that skirmish, you can see that Spock gets shot and is in real bad trouble, and he has to be. All of them have to be beamed up on an emergency footing. So they have to leave in a hurry. So that's how the teaser ends, with Spock in trouble, the planet not at all the state that they thought it was going to be. First act starts with a red alert because they see Klingons. The rest of the first act is about Spock being in trouble and but being looked after by Mbenga, if I pronounce it right, the new doctor, who's a Vulcan specialist. And it ends with Kirk McCoy beaming to the planet, and Kirk also injured by the mugato, and McCoy yelling for help, yelling, screaming, pleading for help to the hapless villager, the hill people. The hill people are looking at him as if they can't understand what he's saying. At least in that scene, that's what it looks like. That's how the first act ends, with Kirk's life in danger. Spock's life is already in danger, and McCoy is stranded on the planet without being able to communicate with his ship. Second act starts with Kirk being ferried to the village on a what looks like a stretcher, and then we are introduced to Nona and Tyree as well. There's some stuff with the sick bay and all that happening in the second act, but primarily the second act is about introduction of the hill people, their campment, and Kirk getting cured by this Nona lady, who is a Kanutu, sort of a witch doctor. At the end, it's not really tenterhooks. McCoy hears off, which is just because Kirk is saved by this witch doctor, she has to get something in return, and it gets very serious. And at the last, he says, "Oh, that's just only a legend. You don't have to even listen to it." So that's how the second act ends. Third act starts with McCoy waking up and only to find Kirk at Nona's feet. And so, because you're already under suspicion that Kirk is under the influence of Nona, the witch doctor, and we actually see him there with her. And then the third act is about establishing, okay, two things are happening in this third act, which is one at the sick bay where Spock is getting better with some drama in it, and Kirk and Tyree figuring out what needs to be done. And so now McCoy and Kirk and Tyree, they do something to figure out what is going on in with the villagers, and they want evidence of Klingon interference. That's what they're trying to do. To prove to whom, we are not very clear. Again, we can discuss that during our analysis.
Yeah.
Klingon interference is what they are trying to do, to find out evidence for, and are trapped in the process. So that's how the third act ends. This is definitely a cliffhanger because we don't know McCoy and Kirk are going to fight back or are they going to be trapped. Fourth act starts off with, of course, them getting away. Where Kirk and McCoy throw a few punches and get out of the way with gunshots all around, and they even pick up a flintlock in the process. So that's what they do. That's how the fourth act starts, and there's a lot of fist fight and people stealing things from each other and philosophy thrown around. All that heavy duty stuff happens in the. Nona is dead. Tyree picks up a gun and is ready to fight. And guns are compared to serpents in the Garden of Eden. The planet is compared to Garden of Eden. Spock is alive. There is a mild joke and heavy philosophy. So at the end of the fourth act, very tired, not only Kirk and McCoy, and that's how the episode. So, what did you think
Yeah.
of Private Little War?
Yeah.
Oh,
Way too many things happening. I
right, right.
I feel that basically this had a very interesting premise because Kirk, after 13 years, he goes back to this planet and he finds a primitive tribe suddenly is hunting with flintlocks. And it doesn't seem like everyone on the planet has. His friend, who is the leader of the other group, does not seem to have any of those advancements. So it does appear that someone has come from outside and interfered with the development of the planet, and that is very curious. And I thought that was a very interesting part of the story, that someone from outside has decided to play one tribe against the other. For what is not very clear. What were the Klingons doing exactly? Were they trying to take over the planet, which they could have done anyway, because there aren't that many tribesmen to begin with. And then as the episode progressed, you have this individual Nona who's playing both sides. She is, her characterization was a little annoying. And then
Mm.
she, of course, she has to try and seduce Kirk, because it seems to me that that's one way to get power. And I don't know, maybe she wanted to take over the Enterprise. It's not very clear. She had a lot of ideas, and it was all, she proved to be incredibly stupid also towards the end, because as she betrayed her husband and attempted to cross over to the other tribe, they killed her. And that was the end of her. And then that was enough for Tyree to give up his notions of pacifism. It was a bit much, Bala. There was way too much going on. And then you have Spock in the sick bay with Nurse Chapel holding his hand and then trying to initiate some kind of a role. There were too many things going on, and it was hard to wrap your head around, trying to follow one from the other, trying to keep track of who's who. It did not help that most of the tribesmen looked alike. It's probably because of those hairstyles. And I couldn't tell Tyree apart from the first villager you're introduced to, and that was also a little confusing. And yeah, I, I do wish maybe they hadn't quite tried to do so many things with it. What did you think?
Yeah, I no. Let's start with the teaser. Right off the bat,
Yeah, yeah,
I thought the teaser had some promise because you see that
exactly.
they're
Yeah,
showing peaceful people, a nice planet, and all that. And of course, you're going to be proven wrong immediately. That we knew.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you see an ambush in play. The big question is, what was the Klingons don't obey rules or laws or any such thing unless it is being forced, like in the Errand of Mercy, you see that they are
yeah,
forced to stop the war. Otherwise, they don't have any such thing. They compunction in going and conquering a planet full of
yeah,
weak people. So why the little schemes and games and all that? Just go with full
yeah.
might and occupy the place. Why supply flintlocks and waste your time, right? So this is not the Klingon way. That's more a
Yeah.
very a petty thief ish colonial type of thing they're trying to do. Make one side strong and then finally take over them, and they can be colonies. So, but that's not how Klingons operate. They just conquer. They
They
don't
just conquer.
expect
Yeah.
then they say, okay, here are the rules and regulations, you have to follow that. Whether you have a flintlock, in fact, if they don't have weapons, easier it is for them. The job is done. That's what they did in
Yeah.
Kenya.
I find it very strange that they attempt to take over Organia, which is a much more developed planet, and here they're attempting to play both sides. What are they doing?
There was no
Yeah, there
need
is.
for such schemes, right? So just go there. Okay, all of them are pacifists anyway. They're going to keep smiling, and you can't tell one from the other.
Yeah,
Like that's what a
yeah.
very very logical Klingon move. And then you can have the police in the galaxy, which is our little federation. They say, "Oh, there's a wrong committed. I'm going to fix that." That would have been very interesting.
That would have been very interesting. Yes, instead you have the Klingons here. There, what are they trying to do? Being altruistic, giving them firearms, how very kind of them and very un-Klingonish. I, I don't quite understand what their motives were. And then they're
Hmm.
just circling the planet, going round and round. They're in orbit, doing what? Were they trying to instigate what? Now, like you said, if they wanted to take over the planet, they could have done it so easily. There are so few villagers, and they're all so
Hmm.
insular. They
Hmm.
don't really understand most things. They never even knew how to forge iron. So it would have been easy. Instead, why do you teach them to forge iron? I
Correct.
They are so messed up. The Klingons are terribly messed up in this episode, and I don't quite understand where they were coming from or what they were trying to do. If they wanted the medicinal plants that this planet has, they could have easily just taken them. Who's going to
Klingons with
stop them?
medicinal plants. Okay.
I know that makes more sense than
Ah,
Klingons giving
correct.
them firearms and aiding their development. I don't.
Yeah. In fact, an alternate plan for them would have been to mask this as a make this as their own base and start operating. Anyway, let's assume for a moment that since this is the far reaches of the galaxy, and they had only funding for flintlocks and a few museum items that they had, he's just thrown in there and said, "Prove yourself. Now try to colonize this place." And was given a
Yeah.
shoestring budget, right? So, oh, what do I do? I have flintlocks. What can I do? Hey, why don't I give it to one warring faction? Maybe I can take over, use the resources of the planet itself for that.
Yeah. If they had given some sort of an explanation, something like that, I think it would have made sense. But then you just have this one Klingon here with his bushy eyebrows being very kind to the villagers, and you don't. It's hard to figure out where his motives lie. What is he trying to do? And Appella, I think his name is, the head of the
Yeah.
hill people on that
Mm.
planet. He turns out to be one of those simpering idiots who has no idea what he's doing. Very irritating. It's very, very irritating. And I am very surprised that a Klingon who's called Krell, I believe, didn't
Oh,
shoot
is
him
it?
on sight, given that it's all very out of whack, completely out of
Hmm.
whack.
No, before
Yeah.
they started throwing punches, Kirk and McCoy and the lot. But anyway, before that,
Uh-huh.
I think that would have been
Yeah.
the perfect place where the Klingons could have explained, with my shoestring budget, this is all I could manage, flintlocks, and you're taking this away from me. That
Yeah.
could have been a
No,
perfect
instead,
place to say that.
yeah, instead Krell went unconscious, very inconsiderate of him. He never told us what he was doing. He just got punched and he went out like a light, and that was it.
Kirk
Yeah.
is not Kirk is definitely seen throwing a punch at Krell, but
Uh,
McCoy he took out one of those sticks and actually managed to only hit the sticks. But this guy, the local guy, just fell out there anyway.
yeah. That was even worse. They all went down too quickly. They
Oh
all
yeah.
went down too quickly, very, and we never got any answers. And most of the time, you're forced to put up with Tyree's
Uh,
pacifist attitude. He didn't want to fight the hill people, and okay, that goes against their nature. That's fine, but
right.
I wonder how the hill
No,
people
I
adapted to
I
violence so
thought he
quickly.
was the
Yeah,
only character that was relatable. Tyree was the only
yeah,
one who was true to his original character. Yes, he did
yeah.
turn to
Everybody
the other
else
side a
was,
bit too quickly, but
yeah,
I could see that Tyree was totally stuck to his principles. He did whatever to see if he can remain a pacifist. Once a pacifist, always a pacifist is what I thought it was.
yeah,
And then there's a change of heart because he's seeing his wife killed like that brutally. So he does have a
yeah.
change in heart. I liked his arc the best in this. The
It was the
worst was
clearest, I think. Yeah.
Appel. That guy was the worst. He just kept smiling and he wanted more and more and more.
The problem with Apella is he never really got anywhere. You just knock
Mm,
him out, and that was the end of his role.
right.
We never. I think that if at least Apella had some more dialogue or something to show his
Mm,
motivations, that would have been more interesting. But instead, how did he come by the Klingons in the first place? How did the Klingons find them, first of all? And
mm,
secondly, what were they trying to do? Was Apella looking for some sort? Apella seemed to like violence a lot, but what was he looking for dealing with the Klingons? Was he looking for some sort of development, which wasn't happening? People were just dying.
mm,
What was his motivation? If he wanted to be the most powerful person, that wasn't made very clear because he's just being a simpering character throughout and until
mm.
he's knocked out, and then that's the end of his characterization. I feel that they were going in too many directions with this. And then on the other hand, Bala, you also have Spock getting shot, and then
Mm.
he's in the sick bay, and then you have this thing going on with Nurse Chapel. I didn't know whether to laugh or to be annoyed that we're switching so much between this and that, and with me trying to figure out where the story is going. But
Yeah, I agree with you. That was an unnecessary distraction. So, if the core philosophy is, do we stick to the path of peace, or
yes,
just because your enemy has got stronger, do I also get stronger? That conflict
ah,
I got. We should stick
yes,
to that. However, in connection to the larger story, it didn't do any service to that. So it
yeah,
was as if there were two things going on in parallel, which there was no
yeah.
connection until at the end you saw Kirk said, "Oh, I'm alive because you can hear my voice." That's pretty much the weakest connection you have. So, or if they had
It
said
was
something like the flintlock had a Klingon thing and you had to get it out of Spock's body, but if you did, he would die. But if it remained there, he would remain alive or something like that.
Yeah, I also feel that by reducing Spock's role in the story, it made a lot less sense. If he had been
Mm,
down there with the rest of them, with Kirk and McCoy, he might have made sense of what was going on. Instead, he was tossed back into the ship. And it's also very surprising to me that the Klingons, being a different alien race from a different part of the galaxy, come up with the exact same technology that the humans did with flintlocks. And they're
mm,
using the same materials, they're using the same design, they're using the
mm,
same trick. You would have thought that they would come up with something different, something alien. Instead, you come up with the exact same technology that the humans did, which made it very convenient for Kirk,
mm,
who stole one rifle from
mm.
the hill camp. The earth-made flintlocks would have been. The barrel is the same, the materials are the same, everything is the same, and that made it extra easy for him to teach Tyree how to use it.
Actually, you're right. Even on Earth, if you take civilizations which were separated by, let's say, a large ocean, let's say the Americas, the Incas, and all that, they were not into bows and arrows so much as they were into catapults and all that. Whereas on
Yes.
the other side of the ocean, they were more into bows and arrows and less of catapults. And when people migrated, they learnt about the other stuff, is when they exchanged technology and they got to know these tricks and they could learn one technique from the other. So even
Yeah.
in a on a planet, you have such variation. How
Yeah.
come almost he says, particularly says this is the far end of the galaxy? How come they have such unbelievable coincidence that they build this exact same thing that men also built a long,
Yes,
long time ago?
I find it so odd, particularly since these are Klingons. And we are given to understand that the Klingons are different from humans, especially when it comes to the way they think, the way they've developed, the empire that they've got, and
Mm,
their physiology is different. Now, strangely, I think if this, whatever the Klingons were doing here, were done by the Vulcans, it would have made more sense because it's logical, it's calculating, it's exactly the sort of thing they might have done, but not the Klingons. The Klingons would have just razed the place to the ground.
mm,
And given what we're told so far about the Vulcans, I feel, or a race like the Vulcans, who are then coming up with an idea that giving them a human like device would kind of give them some sort of an edge, would have made sense.
mm.
Here, I think the Klingons are totally, completely out of place, and I have no idea what they're doing.
On
Yeah.
another note, what did you think
Yeah.
of the mugato, which makes its appearance like twice in this?
It has a funny way of jumping. Uh, I and its anatomy is very strange. It looks like a furry dragon with a little tail. It's got a lot of
Right,
teeth, and it's an interesting specimen. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of the yeti because of all the
right,
fur and the color.
correct, correct.
And it's bipedal. It walks
Mm,
on two legs. It's got a
mm,
poisonous bite. And
mm.
does it have poison in its claws also? I don't remember exactly, but it is
Fangs
pretty
is what he
lethal.
says.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fangs. Yeah,
fangs. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
got
He.
poison in its fangs, so it's somewhere between. It's got all the power of a cobra and all the might of a yeti, so it makes it pretty
Mm,
formidable. And it was very interesting that they mentioned that the mugato hunts in pairs, so if you
mm,
kill one, the mate is going to come and try and exact its revenge, which also suggests some kind of intelligence for it. So
mm.
I
Yeah, I like the use
yeah,
of the Mogato in the
yeah,
story also because
exactly.
it brings that excitement and brings the
Yeah,
urgency into the story.
the Mugato had a bit more personality than Apella. That's for sure.
Nice contrast. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's focus on Nona next. I really want to
Ah,
take her character apart.
yeah.
I,
Yes.
I thought it is very stereotypical rather than try to be a three-dimensional character. So here is
Yeah.
one person was just one intention of being the most powerful person there, and
Aha.
she will do whatever it takes to get there. To me, it sounded very two-dimensional rather than her having any layers in that.
So, in her case, what you said is absolutely right. She didn't have much of a personality other than her personality actually seems to be defined by one or two traits: seduction, one,
Mm,
ambition, two, and power mad, three. That those are the only three things you see in her. And given that we keep talking, especially Kirk, about the Garden of Eden and serpents, what does that make Nona? That does that make her the Eve that eventually brings down this entire civilization? It seems that she's the one who brings about that ultimate fall from grace for these characters,
mm,
especially for Tyree, because
mm,
after she died is when he started changing his mind, and he finally accepted that he needs to be violent in order to survive. Until then it was all very peaceful, and she's the one who ultimately gave that final mm, push towards shattering the idol that this planet had. So I don't know whether she's supposed to be some sort of an alien Eve, or whether she's supposed to be a mix of Eve and the serpent, or whether she's a serpent. It's very not very
mm,
clear. But yeah, as far as characterization goes, she was not very well drawn. There were also some situations where she was posing like a model. Yeah, she did have some very odd poses,
yeah.
particularly when she decided to steal Kirk's phaser and go to the Hill tribe, and then she
Mm,
was accosted by them. She, every now and then she would smirk and then put her hands on her hip and then turn this way and that, and you're wondering why is she doing that? She's
mm,
in danger. This is what is going through her mind, and we still have no answer as to what she was doing with that plant. She used that on Tyree and kind of drugged him. She
mm,
used that on Kirk and kind of drugged him too. But what
mm.
was that plant? We never got any answers. So
Correct.
definitely not a favorite character of mine.
Right. According to me, Nona had that one ambition that's there, and she, when it didn't seem to be, everything was wrong with what she had chosen. Uh,
Yeah,
she goes and tries to take the phaser and go to the opposing camp. At least maybe I will get what he has. Maybe I'll become the powerful person there. Of course, that
yeah.
backfires and doesn't work out well for her, and she ends up dying. So to me, that whole poison sequence was dramatic because she's a local witch doctor. She made it very celebrating types. They're very festive in a very larger than life kind of a thing. She was trying to
Yeah,
give
yeah.
it more action, and I agree with you. She stood in very vague poses everywhere she stood. She never stood still or
Yeah.
talked to anybody straight. And like I said, it is a stereotypical. We have seen this enough in Bollywood that There's that lady who stands right next to the bad guy, and she has a song usually. If it were a Bollywood movie,
Yeah.
Nona would have had a song going around every bad guy in that valley, and at the end trying to take her. Oh yeah, she had the dagger too, right? That
She
also
had
fit.
a dagger.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately for Nona, she's a little low on smarts. Everything does has been incredibly unintelligent,
Mm.
particularly when she attempted to seduce Kirk. And given how Kirk responds to women with the way we've seen him react, I don't think she would have needed to use it.
Hmm.
She attempted like I said, what was the purpose behind attempting to seduce Kirk? Was she trying to go back to the Enterprise and maybe take over the Enterprise, which would have suited her ambitions just fine?
She didn't even know that Kirk had the phaser till he pulled it
Yeah,
out. The Mugato came and attacked, and that's when he
and
pulled it
that's
out,
when
and that's
she
when she notices that he has a phaser on him.
yeah, that wasn't the motivation either. She should have anticipated that stealing the phaser and attempting to defect to the other tribe is not going to end well. And I am surprised that she never had the self awareness to. She never used her plants on them. This
Mm.
completely overpowered and ultimately killed, which
Yeah,
is tragic but unsurprising given how she was behaving up to that point.
yeah.
Yeah,
Before
there
her.
was
Mm.
no sympathy, unfortunately, because she
Mm.
was basically begging for it, and it happened.
Mm.
Not a very well drawn out character. I feel they could have done a lot more with her. Instead,
Mm.
even that one sequence where she healed Kirk from the Mugato's poison. What was that? There was so many things happening. She puts a quivering root on his shoulder, and then she does this dance that's not a dance.
Now, we see this is a local witch doctor, right? So whenever somebody utters that phrase, local witch doctor, that's exactly what comes to mind. Somebody
Yeah.
trying to do a big ritual dance with a herb in their hand or something, beating the hell out of the victim. This is what you're typically shown in movies and wherever. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what they played on, and that for me was not so disturbing as was the fact that there were two people who were dying, and one was
Yeah.
uh, on the ship, and we didn't have any consequences because of that. Uh,
Uh,
that instead of
yeah.
Spock being up there with all this drama, he could have been down there. He could have been the one who been relieved of the poison from the Mugato, right? Then
Yeah.
it would have really connected instead of Kirk going through all this.
Yeah, and Spock was actually, like you said earlier, Spock, when he was shot by that flintlock, there could
Mm.
have been some sort of Klingon technology or something they could have shown. Instead, he was just booted out.
Mm.
And he spent most of the episode unconscious and being kind of with Nurse Chapel mooning over him. The
That
rest,
was totally.
and and then I think having Kirk also injured was a bit of overkill. That was too much.
Right,
There was no
right.
need for that. I understand that where they were going with that was they wanted mm, to bring some sort of an element of doubt because you don't know whether Kirk is acting on his own or whether he's acting on Nona's under her influence. But that's not made clear either, so you don't know what you're watching exactly. I think
Mm.
probably cutting down on those attacks, one of them could have been attacked. That's fine.
That
There
would have
could have
been a
been,
superb conflict. How come this guy doesn't even flinch?
he doesn't flinch. Or you never know, he might have flinched and acted in a completely bizarre manner. You never know. That would have been
Oh, yeah, like the other side of paradise. Okay, okay, I get it.
exactly, yeah. It could have
Yeah.
been interesting. Instead, you have Kirk, who's Kirk. And
Mm.
yeah, they could have done so many things with this. Nona, in so many ways, she was very stereotypical. She was that
Mm.
kind of ambitious woman who would bring down the entire culture or civilization just because she wants something that the more rational man does not want. And I'm a little uncomfortable with that kind of reasoning.
Mm. Actually, here's my idea. So Spock gets bitten by Mugato, and Tyree comes to the rescue, and
Yeah,
they get their refuge in that cave. Now Nona does her thing, gets the poison out of Spock, and
yeah,
uses the herb or whatever. So he goes under the influence of that drug and holds her hand and says, Christine, where were you? And she, in his mind, she looks like Christine, and Christine can sort of reciprocate and all that. And then
Yeah,
suddenly,
yeah.
after the influence is gone, Christine goes out, and this Nona lady appears and like, who are you? Why are you here? That could have been interesting for me. If you really wanted
Yeah.
that Christine Spock thing, they could have done that on the planet itself.
And it would have been interesting to see how the plant would have reacted to Spock's green blood. And
Oh yeah, yeah, that would have been
yeah,
an interesting research.
yeah, would it have brought out some emotion in Spock? Would it have forced him to do something that he normally wouldn't do? There were so many
Mm.
possibilities. Instead, he's just bumped up. So I was saying it's unfortunate that Spock was sent back to the ship, but I will say that I did like the new character, the Doctor. Uh,
Oh
the
yes,
he was
Mbenga,
such an excellent Mega. I think so. Yeah.
Mbenga.
Imbenga. Yeah, Dr. Imbenga
Yes,
was actually an excellent character. I really liked his characterization and I liked how self assured and confident he was, and also a little bit teasing because he said he told Nurse Chapel that Spock probably knew that you were holding his hand and he just walked out. It was an
yeah,
excellent
yeah.
character.
He was charming. He knew what he was doing. He was an expert.
Yeah,
Uh,
assuring character.
totally. So when
And
McCoy says that he's in the right hand, he was absolutely right. Spock
absolutely
was
right.
in the right hand.
Yes, he was an excellent character.
I don't think
Yeah.
he's there in any other episode.
Eh,
Yeah, exactly.
he was everything that Nona should have been. He was intriguing. He was absolutely charming. He was very self-assured, confident. I think,
Correct.
yeah, he that Nona should have been something like that instead of Nona was Nona and most annoying.
Yeah, and given that Mbenga's screen time is also much less, I think the impression that he left on us was everlasting, right? They probably remember
Yeah.
Nona after a while.
Nona was there most of the time, and she's just a fleeting memory. But the
Mm.
doctor Mbenga was just so larger than life in a realistic.
So maybe we can talk about likes and dislikes. I think
Uh
that's
huh.
pretty much. Actually, one more thing I wanted to talk about before we get into likes and dislikes.
Yep.
The,
Yep.
right
Yep.
in the center of it, they have the discussion of balance of power. I like that bit because it is very intriguing. Two philosophies at discussion here, right in the middle of it
Yeah.
all, questioning Kirk's
Yeah.
motives and Kirk's action. Right, so his
Yeah.
motives are one thing, but his actions are completely different. I think McCoy did a
Absolutely.
fantastic job in questioning the right thing at the right time. What did you think about
Exactly.
that?
I thought that was amazing because McCoy is, he knows that what Kirk is saying has its flaws, and he knows that Kirk has just recovered from this extremely traumatic injury, and he knows what Nona has done to him. So he did absolutely the right thing, questioning it, and he was very adamant that the prime directive be followed, which was also, I thought that was extremely well done. And he had a point because you don't want to interfere in this planet and get involved with the Klingons. Why would you do that? It didn't make any sense. Kirk had his own ideas and he's not listening to anybody. McCoy was the conscience that Kirk should have had, but Kirk, of course,
Hmm.
doesn't listen. And one more thing I found very odd about that scene, Bala, was how Kirk was applying human logic to the Klingons. It's okay
Hmm.
to say that on Earth, the human colonial powers did this and that to try and attempt to divide a potential colony or the people of a particular colony. That's fine, but why would you apply the same thing to the Klingons? It didn't make much sense to me because the Klingons are an alien race. They're from a different planet. Their evolution is different. They look different. They behave different. And then here Kirk is very merrily applying human logic to the Klingons and talking about division of power and how the Klingons may be manipulating this particular race to do what they want, which is actually a very un-Klingon thing to do. So those are my thoughts. I did find some discrepancies.
I think that what didn't appeal to me in that conversation was the ending part of it. That is,
Yeah.
the lesson seems to be that war isn't a good life, but it's life. So they've
It's life.
accepted that
Yes, he did
war.
say that. Yeah.
It's a accepted practice. There is a statement clearly made, and but here in balance of, did I say balance of terror? Yes, I did.
No, you
Okay.
said balance of power.
Power. No, no. I meant
Yeah,
the episode balance of
yeah,
there. It was clearly made there that this is both of them are wishing for the same thing. Unfortunately, they happen to be on opposite sides. That's
yeah,
what is the essence of that episode. Whereas
yeah.
here, I'm not getting a clear message like that. So you're saying all this, but you're doing the wrong things. I think maybe that's what the lesson is. I don't know. The commentary I thought was clear is having two sides and giving them weapons. Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Or you do
Or
it
is it?
because you have to do it? I don't quite get it now.
And see, the problem here is you turning an naturally pacifist race into something violent. I don't think that's a great achievement. And why couldn't Kirk have just followed what Tyree wanted and destroyed the damn forge on the Hill
Mm,
People's side? Because if he
mm,
had done that, they would have lost the technology, they would have lost the iron, they would have lost most of it.
mm,
Instead of that, they're going to wipe each other out pretty quickly. There aren't
mm,
many people on that planet to begin with. The
mm.
next time Kirk and his crew go there, or next time any Federation starship goes there, I feel that there won't be anybody left. It is
Correct.
not the best resolution. Destroying the forge and the weapon making technology might have been a better course of action given the nature of these people. Other than Appella, who is very bloodthirsty,
Mm,
instead, Kirk feels that war is life because humanity has known nothing else. Therefore, war is life for everybody in the galaxy makes no sense.
mm. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our likes and dislikes. What did
Huh.
you like about this episode and what did you not like?
So I think the commentary, like you said, was a bit jumbled, but at the same time, the core concept of having two very powerful races attempting to manipulate a less advanced race is actually a very interesting concept. The teaser was very intriguing that way because you also had this creature called the mugato, which is poisonous and which is very violent, and I wish they had explored that a little bit more. I liked all of those aspects, and I also like that this race was intrinsically peaceful. They were basically peaceful, and they're being turned violent because of outside influences. Those are the things I really liked. And I also liked Dr. Menga a lot. But I feel that the execution was lacking quite a bit. And I also think that having the Klingons serve as the other faction was really grating, was really, really distracting. It is not in their nature to do what they were doing here in this episode, and I didn't like that at all, and that is probably my biggest pet peeve. The second one is Nona. What were they doing with her character? Why was she introduced the way she was introduced? And they could have done so much better with that individual instead of doing what they did. So, yeah, those are my two greatest dislikes.
Like you said, I like the war and peace commentary,
Yeah.
except for the ending part of it. The takeaway for me was not something that was satisfactory from my
Uh,
point of view. Really like Tyree's character arc, how a
yeah.
peaceful man, peace loving man is transformed into somebody who wants to kill because of his own personal agenda being so because they show him almost aiming the gun and squeezing the trigger at James, his own brother
Yes.
and friend. So that
Yeah.
was a good scene there. And
Mm.
also the fact that he finds his wife dead and he wants to do something to avenge. So that's why he takes up the gun. So this is a
Yeah.
very, very good arc. The Mugato's role was very interesting. They quickened the pace of the plot by being there at two occasions. Both these occasions, it sped up things. So that was the role of Mugatos. And they looked more funny to me than scary. But hey, what the hell? You can't get them all.
I find it
Yeah.
very unfortunate, Bala, that the two things we liked the most were the most fleeting. And the Mogato and the Dr. Mbenga, they were both
Yeah.
too fleet, too fleeting. And of course, you have Nona who was there throughout, and we don't even recall a lot of what she was doing. It's very
Yes, that's one.
unfortunate.
So Nona, we have whacked the character so many times, but specifically, I think this "Take Me to Appella" scene was the most appalling of them all. So I really think that, and that's going to be my question to the screenwriter also for the hypothetical
Yeah.
question is please rewrite that scene so it's more convincing, or
Ah.
somehow. And the second part would be to make Spock's whole storyline in line with what's happening on the planet. Which brings me to the hypothetical question: what would you ask the screenwriter if they were to appear on our podcast? What is your question?
I, I personally would ask them to please redo Nona, first of all. And secondly, please, could you just somehow make this a bit more believable by swapping out the Klingons and putting some other race that any other race would have done, just not the Klingons? It made no sense. And the suspension of disbelief was utterly destroyed. You just cannot get into it because of that. And also, please give Dr. Mbenga some sort of a role, a better role, a bigger role. If he had been down on the planet, things would have been super interesting. They could have reconsidered those so many plot points, and I feel they could have done a lot better. What about
Super.
you? Yeah,
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 those are the two
yeah.
things.
Okay, yeah,
Nona's Take Me to Apella scene rewrite,
yeah.
and Spock's
I think, yeah,
status being fused into the main story, and that would have
yeah.
made an
That would
amazing
have been,
impact.
yes, absolutely. Okay.
And so, thank you so much, Parvati. This is fun
Thank you.
discussing a private little war, and see you in the
Yep.
next episode. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.